Good evening, everyone. Uh, Lean in India today is very excited to partner with Sipping Thoughts and BW Business World to bring you a session on the responsibility of leadership with global business leader Vinita Bali. This is our second session in Leadership Series, a program that brings thought leaders from different walks of life to talk about their words of wisdom on varied topics. Our first session with Apurva Purohit focused on demands COVID puts on women and how best to cope up with it. I'm Urvi Juneja, Senior VP at 3D and Chapter Leader at Lean in India. So just briefly about our partners, let me start with Sipping Thoughts. Sipping Thoughts is a multi-platform media company co-founded by Sukirti Gupta and Meeta Gudgutia. It was set up keeping in mind the tagline, Real Women, Real Thoughts, a no-judgment platform where they want to create a network of women for women. Coming to BW Business World, it's a fortnightly magazine launched more than 3 decades ago. It's among India's largest and most respected business magazines. BW team prides itself in spotting key trends in economy and business. It has done this consistently over decades, whether it was spotting the rise of the IT sector in the 90s or the pharma and the telecom trend in the late 90s or the social media, healthcare, or falling of e-tailing revolution in recent times. And now about Lean in India. Lean in India is the official national chapter of Lean in India. Lean in is a community founded by Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg that empowers women towards their ambitions. Lean in India aims to contribute towards encouraging more women in leadership positions through peer circles, campaigns, collaborations, and events. Our aim is to increase representation of women in the workforce by enabling those women and making them feel empowered. In today's session, the responsibility of leadership, global business leader Vinita Bali, who has worked for iconic companies and lived and worked in 5 continents, will share with us her observations and thoughts on leadership and what constitutes effective leadership, whether in business, academics, or any other profession. With this, I will hand over to Sukirti, co-founder Sipping Thoughts, to introduce our esteemed guest, Ms. Vinita Bali. Over to you, Sukirti.
Well, thank you, Urvi. It's my privilege to introduce Ms. Vinita Bali, a leader, an icon, actually someone who actually probably needs no introduction. Vinita, as you mentioned, is a global business leader with extensive experience in leading large companies, both in India and overseas. She has worked with eminent multinationals like the Coca-Cola Company and Cadbury Schweppes in a variety of marketing, general management, and chief executive roles in the UK, Nigeria, South Africa, Latin America, and in the US, in addition to, of course, Britannia Industries in India. She is now the non-executive director of global boards of Smith & Nephew, Cognizant Technologies, and Bunge Limited. She also serves on the global board of Syngenta International AG from April 2012 to June 2017, and GAIN, which is the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, a Swiss foundation based in Geneva, from July 2010 to December 2018. She was also the chair from January 2015 to December 2018. In India, Vinita serves as the non-executive director on the boards of CRISIL and Syngene International, is a member of the Board of Governors of the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, and chairs the CII National Committee on Nutrition. She was also on the board of the Titan Company Limited from October 2006 till March 2018. Vinita, of course, has been recognized in forums nationally and internationally and has won many awards for her various contributions to business and society. We're very excited to have her today with us. And with that, I give a very, very warm welcome to Ms. Vinita Bali. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Sukriti, for that very generous introduction. And I would also like to start by thanking Sipping Thoughts, Lean in India, and of course, Business World for this wonderful opportunity to share some thoughts on leadership. When Urvi and Sukriti and I talked about this initially, we said that should we talk about leaders, should we talk about something else? And in my mind, it was very clear that this is the time to actually talk about leadership. That is why we called this session The Responsibility of Leadership. We didn't call it the privilege of leaders. We didn't call, what characteristics define leaders and so on. And in my mind, there is a very straightforward and a simple reason for doing so. And this has come out of my experience over almost 3.5 decades of working in the corporate world, not just in India, but also in the UK and Nigeria and South Africa, when I worked with Cadbury's, and then in North America, as well as in Latin America, both places where I lived, in Atlanta and Chile, where I worked with the Coca-Cola company, and of course, back home in India. So what I'm about to share are thoughts that have emerged over this fairly long journey of working with very iconic companies and brands, and of working with some of the finest minds in business and management, not just in India, but also globally. Through the board positions that I currently have, which are 3 global boards and 2 listed companies in India, it also gives me the larger perspective of how businesses are being impacted by the goings on in the environment. And COVID is the latest. There are many others like climate change, etc., which have impacted businesses around the world. And it also gives a perspective of how businesses are dealing with the challenges that they face. A lot of these challenges are known challenges. What I mean by that is these are challenges that the world has seen before. So, for example, the financial crisis of 2008 was a significant crisis, that's what we called it, but it wasn't anything new. The world as we know it and as we remember has been through other periods of crises, if not globally, then certainly restricted to a particular geography. The Asian crisis of 1997, 1998 is well known, Latin America, Africa, etc. But I think what we are confronted with right now is a problem which actually, in a strange way, the business world has talked about and written about. We've all heard the term VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I keep saying, well, we are right in the middle of a VUCA world, and we're all quite bewildered. Because no matter how much we've talked about it, how much we have, I don't know how many people have thought about it in detail, but we've certainly talked about it, we've written about it, we've talked about what it means, what are the competencies that are required to operate successfully in a VUCA world. But when it actually happened to us around the world, whether it was political leadership or scientific leadership or business leadership or NGO leadership, everybody was quite bewildered. We had seen Ebola, we had seen SARS, we had seen MERS, but those again were localized and somehow they were far away. This is the first thing that traveled to almost 200 countries in less than 3 or 4 months. So it actually had everybody bewildered. And therefore, at a time like this, I think it's very opportune and it's very relevant to sit back and reflect on this word we keep throwing around called leaders and leadership. And I want to distinguish between the two, at least in my mind, as I've thought about it. Leader could be a designation, it could be a title. So if I'm called CEO, I'm the leader of the organization. If I am president or prime minister, I'm a leader of the country. If I am, the director of an institute, then I head that institute and so on. But those are positions. It tells me that I'm occupying a position. It doesn't tell me anything about the quality of leadership that I bring to that position. It doesn't tell me anything about the effectiveness of what I am doing. It doesn't tell me anything about how many people are following me, because, what is the point of being a leader if there is nobody following you? If, on the other hand, you think about leadership, the whole thing changes, because certainly leadership has nothing to do with a title, it has nothing to do with a position, it has nothing to do with hierarchy, but it has everything to do with behavior. So, leader is a noun, but leadership is a verb. And therefore, it is about action, it is about behavior, it is about the ability to take ownership and make a situation better than what you found it to be. It is about the responsibility that comes with understanding what your commitments are, why you should be taking the decisions that you're taking. It is about authenticity. It is above all about character as well, because the kinds of actions you take, the kinds of decisions you make, the kinds of expectations you generate in other people actually define the quality of leadership that you as an individual exhibit. And therefore, when I think of leadership, and as I said earlier, it has nothing to do with a position. I could be a management trainee in the organization. I could be the junior most employee in an organization. I can still exhibit traits of leadership, which quite simply are the things that I have spoken about. If I am taking ownership for whatever task or responsibility you have given to me, if I take accountability, not for effort, but for result, if I take responsibility, not for how hard I have worked, but what value I have added, if I demonstrate that I am capable of working collaboratively, if I demonstrate that I have the competency to make the right kind of judgment and decisions, if I demonstrate that I don't have a large ego which precludes me from going and asking for help, then I have demonstrated qualities of leadership. Just by putting me in a position is no guarantee of the effectiveness of my leadership. And this becomes particularly relevant when we are dealing with situations which we talked about earlier that are volatile and ambiguous and uncertain. Take the current situation that we are in. Is the answer to COVID going to be found in political leadership? The answer is clearly no. Is the answer to COVID going to be found in business leadership? The answer is clearly no. Is the answer to COVID going to be found out of academics? Perhaps yes, but certainly it has to emanate from science, the application of scientific knowledge, combined with business and politics and epidemiology and so many other disciplines and facets that all have to come together to say the complexity of the problem is so great because, again, for the first time, we are dealing with not an economic challenge alone. And within that economic challenge, we're dealing with both a demand side issue and we're dealing with a supply side issue. So the challenge is economic, the challenge is social, the challenge is sociological, the challenge is actually psychological because suddenly our ways of working have changed. In normal times, we would all have been in a conference room. I could be seeing you physically, you could be seeing me. We could have had a very different interactive session. But little children are learning how to go to a classroom online. People like me are learning how to do board meetings online. All of us are learning how to communicate with each other looking at a screen. Now, all of this creates challenges which are both individual as well as institutional. And therefore, this unique situation, these unique circumstances, where nobody can foretell what is likely to happen, we're only making some of us are making guesses without knowledge. Some of us are making informed inferences. Some of us are just wishing and hoping that somehow, one of the existing drugs will work and my life will be normal as I knew it. But all of that, or most of that, is unlikely to happen. It'll be some combination of this. When it all started, nobody had any idea. We said, okay, lockdown for 21 days, 3 months, 6 months, who knows? What we do know, and I think that's another very unique facet of leadership, and I believe an essential quality of leadership is, first of all, to acknowledge facts. Because only when we acknowledge facts can we do something constructively, productively, and positively to deal with those facts, because those facts define a situation or a circumstance or an environment within which the answers have to be found. And therefore, this is a time for leadership to actually be collaborative. This is a time for leadership to actually invite divergent views. This is a time for leadership to not be insecure, to not be afraid, to say that if we put together collective wisdom, not of my little community, not of my little state, not of my country, but collaborative across, across the world, because there are wonderful technologies available somewhere. There are scientists that are working on this, and therefore a problem which is complex, a problem which is dealing with, in this case, it is an unknown problem and an unknown solution, or I might even use the word an unknowable problem. There are some issues which are fairly linear. It is a known problem, and I know that there is a known solution. So when a recession happens, when there are floods, when there are other things, we know what needs to be done, and that whole SOS machinery, falls into gear, and actually the situation is taken care of. At times, there are unknown problems to us, but known solutions elsewhere. Even those are easy to deal with. This is an unknown problem with no known solution, at least so far. And therefore, those competencies and those skills of leadership that worked for each of us in the past are no longer sufficient. They are necessary, but they are no longer sufficient to address the enormity of the issue that we have at hand. It requires for both a scientific temperament, it requires innovative thinking and creativity, it requires economics, it requires social sciences, because fundamentally what we are dealing with is not unidimensional. Fundamentally what we are dealing with is multidimensional. It's economics and healthcare and everything else in between, as I said earlier. So when we are dealing with a problem which is unknowable, which is unknown, which is multidimensional, leaders have to approach this in a very, very different way. Nobody can be deterministic. Nobody knows what the solution is. But I think intelligent experimentation is the need of the hour. So why have I spent so much time talking about this? I'm not a COVID expert. I'm not even a scientist. I'm using this as an example really to say that in our lifetime, all of us in leadership roles, in leadership positions, frankly, if you don't have a job and all you're doing is, and that's the most difficult job, actually managing your household, volunteering your time in an NGO or anywhere else, there is a huge demand on leadership abilities even there, because there is nothing that any of us do which does not involve decision making, which does not involve judgment, which does not involve creativity, which does not involve innovative thinking, which does not involve other people. So if we've got ingredients that I have just mentioned, You can put them in any dimension. You can put them in any institution. You can put them in any family. You can put them in any situation. These are the requirements where leadership traits and leadership behavior becomes really important and critical. I am just seeing how long I've talked for. The idea was I talk for 15 or 20 minutes. So let me end with something that I heard on BBC this morning, and that really created a big impact, certainly in me, and certainly is relevant to the topic of leadership. I don't know how many of you have heard the news today, but there was a news item I heard on BBC which had to do with a boat that was full of Rohingya people who were in a boat, and they had been in this boat and at sea because they were trying to obviously flee from Myanmar, and they were near the waters of Indonesia, but nobody was taking a decision on letting them come to shore in Indonesia. So, this boat had been just circling in the waters. Well, guess what? The fishermen of this particular village in Indonesia decided that they're going to get this boat ashore, and they did. And there were interviews with these fishermen, and one of them said, you know what? I don't know what the politics of this is. All I know is that they are people like me. And it was only the right thing to do to save these people. I think that, to me, in one sentence, encompasses the entire idea of leadership, the entire idea of, am I being empathetic? Do I have an understanding of the context? And am I being authentic and thoughtful? And am I doing the right thing irrespective of the consequences? I think what those fisher folks of that place in Indonesia, and I don't even remember the name, displayed was the finest quality of leadership. They decided that the right thing to do under these circumstances, irrespective of anything else, was to protect these people, which included men and women and children and everybody else. And they said, we don't care. This is the right thing to do, and we will do it. And they saved this boat of over 100 and something people. So authenticity, character, conviction, belief in what you're doing, and ethical behavior. If you have a combination of all this, don't worry about functional skills. If you don't know how to solve an equation, there are thousands of people in the world who can help you to do that. If you don't know how to read a balance sheet, there are thousands of people that will tell you how to do that. But nobody can substitute your character, your authenticity, and your sense of purpose, accountability, and responsibility. And if you have that, then you are an effective leader, displaying the qualities of leadership that all of us are drawn to and attracted by. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Vinita.
That's something we can do even in the virtual. There's no klaxon clapping yet.
Thank you. Thank you.
By the way, there's a tool we can do it virtually to create the experience.
I'd rather hear the real clap.
Great. Thank you, Vinita. You were fantastic. I want to now continue with the session further and hand over to Anurag Batra, who's a first-generation entrepreneur, a media mogul, only alumni to be on the board of MDI and chairman BW Business World, and also Meeta Gudgutia, co-founder Ferns and Petals, co-founder Sipping Thoughts, a lady who strongly believes in leadership with creativity. They will be doing a brief Q&A with Vinita Bali. After this, we will take some questions from the audience, and Sukirti will be moderating the Q&A. So over to you, Mr. Batra.
First to Meeta. Go ahead, Meeta.
No, you can start it. Only one question is stuck in my mind between leaders and leadership. So I know that I have been in a family business and a lot of corporate world in the setup now. So there's always a fight to be a leader, or so I know that people fight to be leaders. I want to be the CEO, I want to be this. So how do you marry leadership and leader? And if you have to aspire, what do you aspire for? Leadership or leader?
Oh, I would aspire to leadership. There's no question in my mind. I think your question actually points out to that essential difference. So, CEO is a designation, it is a title, it is a position in the hierarchy. And Meeta, oftentimes we say that, okay, if I'm the CEO, I'm right there on top, and then, everybody has little boxes and they somehow all report to me. That is about position. Think about effective CEOs. Think about CEOs you have respected. Think of CEOs, people come to work and they don't respect the CEO. They don't really have great affinity or engagement with the organization. They are there because, guess what? I need to earn for myself, and this is a placeholder. When I get a better job, I will go and, I'll go and find a better job. And therefore, the large companies, what do? They invite Gallup to do an employee engagement survey. We hear all of those great places to work and so on and so forth. So it doesn't matter because individuals are fairly smart. I might have the title of a CEO, and you might be my COO or my head of marketing. But everybody in the organization is smart enough to figure out that all the great ideas, all the wonderful ideas are coming from Meeta, and Vinita is just one glorified CEO who is sitting there. So the question is that, do you want a title? And I'm not saying everybody who has a title is not effective. That's certainly not what I mean. I think what we're really talking about is if meritocracy, and let's talk about organizations that deal with meritocracy. This could be an academic institution, it could be an NGO, it could be a corporate, it could be a publishing house, it could be any kind of business. If we are saying that this is about meritocracy, and I know family businesses are very different, and it is not just in India, it is everywhere else. So somehow family businesses have their own hierarchy and their set of values and the elderly and so on. But I think it is people like you who will also change the way family businesses think about perpetuating that business. There is a reason why why you have inherited this business, because there was somebody in your family who had a great idea, a great thought, put it into action. That was leadership, leader, etc. I think what subsequently happens in families, and that's another very important distinction, is there then comes a sense of entitlement. So just because my last name is XYZ, why do I feel entitled to be the CEO? My only entitlement should be my competency. My only entitlement should be my temperament, my attitude, my problem-solving skills, all of which come within competency. But somehow in family businesses, that's very hard to change. I've also worked with some family businesses. I've been on the board of a fairly preeminent family business and so on. Now, that is patriarchy. That is a lot of that we have to deal with in the larger ecosystem. But I'll end with an example that, I've used so often because I think it's the best example I can think of. Think of the most respected leader in the world, still respected decades after his passing away. He neither had a title, nor did he have an office, nor was he given any awards by Economic Times or Business World or any international organization during his lifetime or posthumously. And yet, when you talk about leaders and leadership, I cannot think of a better example, and that is Gandhiji. Now, was he ever part of any of the organizations, the Congress or the Muslim? He was everything. He was everything. His influence was pervasive. I've had the good fortune to live in two countries where he had a very big impact. One, of course, was South Africa, where I lived for 2 years when I worked with Cadbury's. And the other one was Atlanta. And I could see the influence that Gandhi had had on Martin Luther King. And even today, when you do surveys, even amongst the young, and you say, who is this iconic leader? It turns out to be Gandhiji. And I think, Einstein said it the best, that, generations to come will scarcely believe that a man such as him in flesh and blood walked the face of this earth. I think that is leadership.
Thank you for reinforcing it. It's like I was kind of I believed in it all my life, but listening from you, it's like it's a reinforcement that yes, this is the right path. To you, Anurag.
Vinita, I was thinking which family business you're talking of when you're talking of those things, but that's more for offline over a cup of tea.
Many, actually. I can give you many examples.
I'll take you up on that once COVID goes away, and it will go, this shall too pass.
Of course.
Yes. I was listening and I was taking notes, and one, I want to ask you, I understand you talked about collaboration, you talked about character, and I keep saying we're in the 3C economy, the collaborative, caring, and contactless. And I like compassion as the 4th C. But some of the things that were relevant as a leader or for leadership are still relevant today. You talk to character.
Of course, of course.
But what do you think? And you talk about how other functional skills can be done by other people. What do you think? What are the new skills that the leader must add? He or she, So what is really COVID has forced us to add some skills that we didn't. Of course, what we had will hold us in good stead, and they're everlasting and relevant always. They were relevant 50 years back. They're relevant now. Hopefully, they'll be relevant in the future. But what are the new? And because I am asking this question, because there are new expectations. So what are the new expectations from the leader? You can take it like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a great question, Anurag. And whilst you were talking, what was flashing through my mind was, this is not about functional skills. This is what I would call leadership skills, or the skill to adapt. I think adaptability, and I will, elaborate a little bit more. Adaptability is going to be a key requirement of the effectiveness of leadership. And some of the other characteristics, which I think become fairly significant and fairly important. I think, first of all, I cannot emphasize enough something called listening skills. I have to be able to listen to lots of divergent thoughts and experiences. And the second thing, which is very critical in addition to these listening skills, is a skill to process disparate pieces of information and converge them onto something which is really the demand for action. So if I'm not listening to a diversity of views, if I'm not taking in, the scientific temperament, the economic temperament, the sociological temperament, all of those things, and coming up with what is really required, I don't end up being an effective leader. Now, that is true not just when you're running a country. I think it is also true when you're running a corporation, any size. It doesn't really matter. We keep talking about, I come from FMCG, and we live and die by understanding consumers. And we've always been saying, we've got to be able to listen to the consumer. We've got to be able to listen to the customer. Well, this is a time where we've got to be able to listen to consumers, customers, competitors, 360, the climate change protagonists, and everybody else. That's a very key skill. I think the next skill, which I think will serve us well, is just humility. I think we've got too many macho alpha males making decisions all round. And I think if we introduced a degree of humility, which says that I don't know the answers, and frankly, I'm not even expected to know the answers. But if I'm smart enough to figure out where to turn for the best answer. And if I'm humble enough to listen carefully, to listen with intent, to listen with purpose, and then collaborate to make the best decision, I think those are the organizations that will go further. Because as I said earlier, we're living in a world which is hugely multidimensional, and it's adding new dimensions every day to its existence, partly driven by technology, partly driven by the circumstances in which we find ourselves. Now, you as the CEO of the company cannot be the expert from everything in business fundamentals to climate change to dealing with a healthcare issue, etc. You are relying on trusted people. You're relying on people with capability. And the last skill I think business leaders must have, therefore, is that good judgment and the ability to be able to spot the right talent.
Thank you so much. In fact, I just want to buttress your argument that if you look at the political leaders across the world, the countries that have done better at COVID response and have avoided that lives versus livelihood debate are countries that are led by women. You look at New Zealand, you look at Germany, and I can go on about countries in Europe. So possibly it's true, in every context, whether it comes to homes or it is institution. I always believe, Vinita, that every individual, including me, have two sides to them.
At least.
At least. Thank you. What is the side of Vinita Bali that we don't know? In fact, every fortnight Business World, we do a dialogue called Nothing Official, officially unofficial. We did Shiv last Saturday. It was the most fun dialogue. We didn't talk about work. So what are the things that we don't know? I mean, which is not on Google, that Sukriti doesn't know, Urvi doesn't know, Vinita doesn't know, a lot of us don't know it, in spite of interacting with you for the last 15 years. So tell us one or two things about Vinita Bali that are interesting and are not out there in the public domain.
So let's do a preview and then we can have a longer chat for Business World. So it gets out there in the public domain. What do you not know about me? I don't know, frankly. I don't know what you know about me, but some of the things which are not associated with me, because everybody sees me as this business person, etc. But, I think business is 50% of what I'm interested in. And this is not now. It has always been the case. I've always been very interested in and participated in arts. So mainly performing arts. I love theater. I just absolutely love music and dance, especially classical music, both Indian as well as Western. So I do some pro bono work for friends and others who have organizations and institutions that are in the space of arts. Of course, I'm continuing the work that I started on nutrition, and that has taken me into a very different world, Anurag. That has taken me into the world of just the basics. Nothing can be more basic than hunger and nutrition. In fact, the first SDG goal for the entire world is zero hunger. And because of the work that I was exposed to, the creation of the Britannia Nutrition Foundation, chairing the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, continuing to chair the National Committee on Nutrition for the CII, it takes me to the real world. It takes me to a world with real people and real problems. And then you step back and say how privileged and fortunate all of us are, because even today, I'm very proud of what India has achieved. I am a product of the Indian education system. I am a product of what India has given me in plenty. But what I'm not proud of is the fact that despite all the resources we have, even tonight, 180 million of Indians will sleep hungry. and to be continued, as we said.
You know, there are lots of questions in security. I just want to know, what is your bucket list? What's, in some way you answered that to solve, you know, your mission of making sure there is nutrition and food and basic hunger going away. But what is, you've done it all. You worked across the globe. You've been MD and CEO of a very venerable business and brand. You continue to be in demand, to be on big boards. So what is left for India? If we talk to you 5 years from now, what would have Vinita Bali accomplished more? Not necessarily for herself, but for others.
You know, actually, it's a very interesting question, because when you talk about accomplish, I think what I have accomplished is the result of what I care about and feel passionate about. And therefore, right now, you know, the more I delve into this, Anurag, the more convinced I am that the whole thinking around business, and it doesn't matter what your business is, it could be the business of education, of making products, services, etc. I think the whole thinking of business, which is to say, here is my business model, and by the way, this is the CSR I do, is completely upside down and doesn't make any sense to me. Because as I've said, what is the point of my having a factory, putting my effluent into a river, and then spending my CSR money to clean the river that I have polluted? Tell me, what sense does any of that make? If, on the other hand, we become more demanding of business, now, you know, the US has started, including Europe, you know, ESG, which is economic, social, and governance. I think we're at the tip of that iceberg. I think we have to go deeper into it and say, if businesses were forced to think about what is the social problem that their business is addressing, or what is the social opportunity or social challenge that their business is addressing, and incorporate that very theme and idea into its business model, then we don't have to do CSR separate from business. You know, I'd love to share a quote, which I, you know, must have read, I don't know how many years ago, but it so stayed with me. Somebody asked Jamshedji Tata, you know, what is your philosophy of business? And he said, very simply, he said, what is good for India is good for the Tatas. I think that sums up the responsibility of business and the responsibility of leadership within business, no matter what your business is.
Thank you. I want to give it back to Meeta and Urvi.
I know.
27 questions and 38 comments. I just want to say that Tata was, in some way, the first adopters of sustainability.
Exactly.
Without, I keep saying Mother Teresa was the world's first social impact entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
She wasn't just called that, you know. It's just, and you know, we at Business World are starting our Business World, India's most sustainable company, and we are partnering with somebody who knows sustainability in a deep way. And we are going to evaluate all the BW 500 companies on the SDG goals. And we're partnering with somebody who's world class. And Vinita, we'd come back to you to involve you in that. I'm sure.
I have great energy for work like that, Anurag. You asked me what I would like to accomplish in the last 5 years. That is a place I want to see a change.
Thank you so much. Back to Meeta. I've enjoyed this conversation and I'm going to listen.
Same. So much learning, so much learning. I know that people are waiting for questionnaires, so I will not take too much time. I just want to ask one question, Vinita, which is very close to my heart. I am from a small town. My husband is from a small town, very basic education. We came, we struggled, we made whatever we made for ourselves. But when I look at school and colleges, the final year student also says that I don't know what am I going to do in life. Very, very few kids, they say that, oh, I'm clear, what do I want to do in life? So what you are studying, where you are being sent, a lot of money being spent now, sending the kids to the best of the colleges. But the kid is still not clear. So how do we marry the career and the education that we get a direction? So it gets into a fine shaping up of the future. That is still a big question mark, which I have not got answered.
And I'm not sure I can give you an answer, Meeta. So one of the other things, going back to what Anurag asked, what are the things you don't know about me? As it happens, I chair the board of the Welham Girls' School in Dehradun. And I'm not from Welham. I went to a day school in Delhi, CJM, but I've really enjoyed because I've learned so much about what shapes young minds and what needs to be done in education. And what I would say, Meeta, is, what is true of the corporate world is also true of education. I think we live in a very dynamic world. So I don't see any reason why our institutions should be static. If college education or school education today is what it was when I went to school, then I think we've let the whole concept of education down. Whether it is, MBA or primary school or secondary school or whatever. And I think those are the things that we have to demand as parents of children, as people who might be on boards, etc., which is ask that fundamental question of what is the purpose of education. Unfortunately, we've got a system, certainly in India, where we don't give marks for comprehension. We give marks for being a parrot. So if I can regurgitate everything without understanding a thing, I can actually get more marks than you, whereas you could be much better than me in terms of grasping the concept and so on. So I think the whole purpose of education, I think I'm forgetting whether it was Oscar Wilde or Mark Twain who said, I've never let schooling interfere with my education. And I think that's very important. I think as parents as well, we have to say, okay, I send my kid to the best school. In parent-teacher meetings, I think parents have to start demanding more from school, more from teachers, more from the school system itself. And I think when we create that other narrative, which is about how do we drive excellence, that's another word I love. But somehow it's gone out of people's vocabulary and lexicon. We are too happy accepting mediocrity. If we said, whether it is education, whether it is the way the bouquet of flowers gets delivered from, ferns and petals, whether it is, the vacuum cleaner that I have just bought, why should there not be excellence in everything that we do? Why should we be accepting of mediocrity and then we ourselves make excuses saying, India mein aise hi hota hai. Kyun hota hai? We should not accept that. So we should, I think fundamentally, the responsibility of a dynamic civil society is to demand. We have to demand more from our elected representatives, of our MLAs and MPs. We have to demand more from our schools, from our colleges, from our employers, from ourselves. Because, I can't be demanding from you and say that, I'm only going to talk, but you have to show me the behavior. So I think we are fundamentally really talking about how do we reinvent ourselves. There's this wonderful quote of Rumi where he says, yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I want to change myself. So I think we have to change ourselves before we can change the world. Or as Gandhiji said, be the change you want to see in the world.
Agreed. So that's been a pain point which I always question and I don't get answers. And the problem looks so big that you really don't know that where will it get started from.
But it has to start somewhere. All problems, all big problems have to be chunked down. You cannot attack a big problem. You can't eat a whole pizza. I mean, you have to eat a bite of the pizza, right? You can't stuff a big thing into a small little carton. So you have to chunk it down. You have to break it apart. You have to say, what is the most important part? What might be some of the quick wins? What is the low-hanging fruit? So there is a way of looking at a problem or a challenge, I would say in this case, and saying, how do we address that challenge? And you might not solve it for your kids and your generation, but frankly, if your effort solves it for the next kid and the next generation, it's like somebody who was planting a tree and said, why are you planting so many trees? You think it's going to grow up in your lifetime? And this woman turns around and says, I'm not planting it for myself. I'm planting it for all those travelers who are going to come to this road hundreds of years after I've gone and enjoy the shade of this tree.
So true. Beautifully said. I thank you, Vinita. A lot of people, a lot of questions. I hand it over to Sukirti.
Yes, we have a ton of questions coming in, and we apologize if we are not able to take yours, but we will start the audience questions. Maybelline, if you would unmute yourself and put your camera on, love to take your question.
All right. Well, thank you again. It was definitely an awesome and inspiring way to motivate everybody to speak up. I've been working in
Maybelline,
a.
could you speak up a little bit?
Yep. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that very inspiring explanation of leadership. That's definitely what we all should hear. It's not spoken enough. It's not implemented enough. I work in a very technical field, always the only woman in the speaking panel, the advisory, technical expert, and usually the one that has to speak up for many things because not a lot of people like to ask questions. Even the men don't like to ask questions. What are some of the great techniques and ways to promote leadership as you said it? I know there's many people that are in leadership roles, have the actual title, but don't really know how to implement it. How do we encourage them to be more empathetic and realize the importance of collaboration and sharing that talent and taking advantage of the talent and strengths that we have rather than just focusing on the weakness?
Thank you, Maybelline, for that excellent question. And I hate to admit it, but of course I will. We're still living in the corporate world, actually in most worlds. We're still living very much in an environment where the senior roles or the senior positions are occupied by men, and therefore, by definition, they make the decisions when it comes to a lot of the things that we are talking about. What we have to do in our roles, you talked about being the only woman in the room. I have worked my entire, business career being the first woman, whatever, the first woman manager in Cadbury, the first professional, or let alone the first woman to go and work in South Africa from India, Latin America, etc., etc. So I think people like you, and there will be several in the audience, we work hard and our merit or our meritocracy gets us to higher and higher levels of responsibility. I think what that also does is it gives us a seat at the table. I keep saying that if I want to change the rules of the game, I have to be in the playing field. I can't be sitting in the viewer stand and saying I want to change the rules of the game. However, how you do it becomes important and critical. And there is no one size fits all because every organization is different, every situation is different. I do believe, therefore, and I had insisted when Sukriti and Urvi spoke to me, I said this cannot be a conversation about effectiveness of leadership with only women in the room. Men are very much part of that ecosystem. And actually, if men don't play their role, then we are slowing down the progress of effective leadership for everybody. The ecosystem, our general ecosystem is there are men and women. And we do need some Renaissance men who are going to change the rules, who are going to encourage diversity. And by diversity, I don't just mean gender diversity. We're looking at so many, in a sense, the pun is intended, complexions of diversity. We have just seen, big uprisings, which really have to do with people who look differently from me. And if the world is full of diversity, and if we believe that there is value in diversity, which means diversity of thought, diversity of perspective, diversity of experience, then I think it behoves all of us who have made it to middle and senior levels of management to put that point of view across, to put that empathy, to create that environment where senior managers are not just paying lip service, but actually are putting their money where their mouth is. And it is going to be a process which requires a great degree of tenacity, because we are not even 20% of the way there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We're having another question that's coming in from Rashmeet Kaur. Rashmeet, please unmute yourself.
Hello, hi, Ms. Bali.
Sorry, before Miss Bali, we request, because we have so many questions that the session extends for another couple of minutes.
Yeah, I could go till about 10 past 6. I've got something at quarter past 6.
No problem. We will wrap up by then. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Rashmi.
Ms. Bali, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your thought process and the perspective on leadership. Like Meeta mentioned, it was such a positive reaffirmation to hear from you. Because as a co-founder for Lean in India, there were some conscious decisions that we actually took, and they were based on that thought process. And it made me feel like 5 years of our community leadership is going in the right direction. What today I want to ask from you is, as we go ahead, talking about the changing paradigms of leadership in the corporate world, what role can we as community leaders, play in terms of some substantial actions that we can change to influence that change in the corporate world? It's easier said. We just need to understand what concrete actions we can take at this particular moment, because it's more needed than ever right now.
I think there are two aspects of these concrete actions. One is, in the work that you do, you work with several large organizations. I think the conversations that you have with the senior executives in these organizations should really be about presenting this other point of view and asking the questions, asking some of the difficult questions. I don't know of any CEO who will ever say that I don't believe in diversity. But we all know of many CEOs who, having said that, have done very little to show or to demonstrate that their belief in diversity can also be seen in the consistency of their actions. So an organization like Lean In, with your access to senior leaders in industry, I think you must encourage some of these conversations, not necessarily to say that you need more women, but really to say that when you look at competency, why is gender a lens that you put before the competency lens? You can do a lot to change the conversations from being focused on gender to conversations that are focused on competency. You can do a lot to say that when I walk into work every day, what I bring to that workplace is my knowledge, my academic background, my experience, my way of thinking, etc., my leadership, my other, credentials of skills, my attitude, my aptitude, my temperament. What has my gender got to do with it? We are continuing to perpetuate this gender debate because we say, oh, this is about leadership for women. I don't see what the difference is between leadership for women and leadership for men. The business world is terrible because we keep saying woman leader. Do you ever go somewhere and you say woman professor or woman lecturer or woman doctor? We never say that, but somehow in the business world, we suddenly become woman leader. Why? If I have done my job well, I am a leader and I've displayed unique traits of leadership. My gender should have nothing to do with it. So you can change very much the direction and the quality of those conversations.
Fantastic. I'd like to take the next question from Sudhir. Sudhir, go ahead. Please do unmute yourself.
Yeah. Thanks, Skruti. Thank you very much, Vinita. First thing for your nice talk. I will just share one thing and ask you one thing. What I want to share that, on the leadership, what you said, just to share with you, we are doing internal program within our company, Innovation Technologies, titled A Manager, Always a CEO. So what we are trying to bring a concept that it is not because you mentioned about title. So we are saying CEO is not a title, is all about mindset. So I just want to share with you.
Great.
Because, you gave a good emphasis on that. Second, my question to you is, how do you rate, and we are saying very objectively, our India, I don't want to talk about globe, India leadership during COVID in terms of, how we demonstrated our leadership. And I'll tell you my one very specific reference, the labor. I feel, this is my view, and I'll be happy to stand wrong and get corrected. My view is that I think we could have dealt with labor problem very differently as a matured leadership, whether it is MSME or at least the large corporates.
Yes,
What are
Sudhir.
your views of labor?
Yeah, we'll get Vinita's views on that. Great question. Go ahead, Vinita.
So, my response is similar to yours. I think we have fallen short in many areas where we could have done better and we didn't. And a lot of this had to do with knee-jerk reactions. A lot of it, if you go back and we say, part of the effectiveness of leadership is to seek diversity of views, is to actually have the ability to process vast amounts of fact and data. As I mentioned earlier, this wasn't just a health issue. This is an economic issue, a social issue, a sociological issue. Even if we had created a framework which said decisions that we make, how is it going to impact the economics of our country, the social fabric of our country, the employment of our country, and so on and so forth. Even if we had just put 4 or 5 basic factors, we could very easily have come to the conclusion that we needed 5-6 days of preparation time. I'm taking your example, to get the migrants back to where they wanted to be, and we have to respect their feelings and their emotions, much as we wanted our children to come back. I keep saying that we pride ourselves on saying, look at our ability to organize a Kumbh Mela where so many crores of people come every day. So do we have the competence to organize? Of course we have the competence to organize. In this case, we just made knee-jerk decisions, very little time, not enough consultation, not enough collaboration. This is the time when you want to take the best views of the best people, irrespective of their political ideology or any other ideology. Where are the epidemiologists who study pandemics, and what is their guidance to us? So yes, we fell short.
So I'll take the last question. Thank you for that. From Resham. Resham, go ahead. Go ahead, Resham.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes. So my question for you is, in these tough times, there are a lot of negative thoughts in the back of the mind, and that too subconsciously. Do you think people at the top or leaders are facing trust deficit these days?
I'm not sure if trust deficit is the word I would use, because frankly, everybody has been caught unawares. We are all bewildered. So trust deficit comes from saying one thing and doing another. And certainly in those areas where the experience of people is, whether it is my employer or anybody else, where I have said something and I'm doing something else, of course, there is a trust deficit. But we also have to remember that the situation in which we find ourselves has been so overwhelming that we're actually forgetting what we came from, where we came from, and where we are heading. So a lot of this is a continuity. I think those organizations that have always looked after their people, by definition, are organizations that are reaching out proactively and are doing many positive, constructive initiatives to ensure that that credibility, that reliability, that trust that they have with their employers is not lost. Now, with or without COVID, there are other organizations which have never really done enough to even build up that trust with their employees. So I think we're talking about a mix of everything. But at the heart of it, what we have to do as individuals is to say, first thing, I'm an eternal optimist, and I believe that this is going to end. Obviously, we're not going to spend the rest of our lives living with COVID. So we have to bring positive energy to a difficult situation that we have in front of us. And as individuals, and in our individual capacity, in our collective capacity, as civil society, do whatever we can to help whoever we can in whatever way we can. So that really is the best philosophy. And we have to stay true to purpose and say that, this has impacted everybody. And therefore, I am going to do what is in my capacity to help someone.
Thank you. And I apologize if we have not been able to get to your question, but we're running out of time. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Urvi. Urvi, please go ahead.
Thank you, Sukirti. So on behalf of Lean in India, Sipping Thoughts, and BW Business World, I wanted to extend our gratitude and appreciation for serving as a speaker on our leadership series today. Vinita, your willingness to share your time and experience was certainly very valuable. Your views on VUCA world and not having a mediocre attitude were very enlightening and something I'm going to take away from this session. Thank you, audience, for joining us and your participation today. We loved hosting you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.